on this chart, we then said, all right, we're ready to go to a device. This is a long process. Have we stopped with just because we have one material that's doing really well? No. Besides, our guys in Delaware love tinkering, right? They're just like any good chemist. They are always looking for the next best engine, and that's exactly what's going on. Next generation materials are being looked at all the time, and we already know we're going down the path of finding even more powerful materials than we have right now. So then what happens? I said we put it in a device. What did we do? Last fall, Jim and I committed to the board that we would have a 6-month plan, and at the end of that 6 months, we would have a modulator that worked, all right, made entirely out of our polymer materials. So the pucker factor goes up a little bit because, yes, you have a board, a really powerful board of directors. They all want to see the success. We have a bunch of shareholders, a lot, and that are out there that are expecting success. And this was a focused effort that I can tell you I was so impressed with the team of what was done, because we went from design into actually fabricating, which I talked about Young Woo doing that. Then it goes making a waveguide, a polymer waveguide modulator. Then it went to passive testing, and that was back to Steve. What were we trying to do? Just make sure laser light goes from point A to point B without spreading all over the place, all right? Once we knew that we could get light through the modulator, then we did modulation, which equals active testing. Okay, Steve did that. And so what's next? Okay, by the year end, we want to get a prototype that's 2.5 gigabits per second, and I'll explain why that number is important. Okay, right. So the year end of 2016. I do want to just show you. This is a scope that Steve has that actually, was measuring the modulation, and just to show you what it looks like. So we have one of our modulators attached to this, and what happens is as the laser light's going through, it's going down that waveguide, and the light is actually modulating as it proceeds down that device. All right. So this was a huge thing for us, and when we put out the press release and we said we had achieved modulation, we knew now. I've been asked for years, does your stuff really work? Well, the answer is yes, okay, because that's what you're seeing, is you're looking at the end of a waveguide, and as that laser's going through, Steve was, had all the alignment right, and it proceeded down through, and we got modulation, which is fantastic. So what are we going to do with this? So before we do that, I'll show you where we're going to go. I'll call this our Standards and Device 101 lesson, all right? And remember I said that number 2.5 gigabits per second is really important. There's this, in the telecommunications protocol area, there's a thing called SONET. Okay, remember how Michael went through the whole telecom market for you? Well, the SONET protocol, there's a thing called OC48, which is 2.5 gigabits per second, and then you have OC192, which is 10 gigabits per second. These are current technologies. It's the industry standard. So when I said our goal is to get essentially an OC48 by the end of the year, that's important because then you can start talking to customers in a more real way. Datacom, on the other hand, has an Ethernet protocol. So we have 10 gigabit Ethernet, 25 GB, 100 gigabit Ethernet. Okay, and those are approximately what you see here, 10 gigabits, 25, or 100 gigabits. That's pretty straightforward. And then I always get phone calls. You say you have a device, you have a coupon, you have this. What does all that really mean? And so for devices, what we just did is a proof of concept. And that's nothing more than a device that's just on a silicon wafer that's being made by Young Woo, and Steve is testing. So we do this proof of concept, and it's essentially on a bench. What we have to get to is what you call prototype alpha. And that's just, it has all the key features that a customer is looking for, okay? That's where we're heading for the end of the year. Okay, we want to try to get that. Is it going to be completely packaged? Probably not. All right, but then you have a beta, and the beta is one where you can then take and a third party can test and beat it up and do whatever they want with it before you commercialize. So you can see it's a pretty deliberate process that we have to go through. I'm really proud of the team. We've beat this up a little bit, but for 15, 16, you know, for those of you who've been around this company for a long time, you know, they were notorious for missing deadlines, right? We did not miss these deadlines. Now, we did beat it by 2 days, but I don't care. A win's a win. Jim and I were happy campers, believe me. And so was the team because, you know, they knew all hell would break loose if we didn't get it done, right? But we started in November on just processing these things and made it all the way to active testing in 6 months. That's a phenomenal achievement, and I couldn't be more proud of the company. So what did I say? We're going to OC48 in a prototype, alpha type thing by the year end is what we're shooting for next. What is the plan? There's a term I used in one of the press releases about optimizing performance. How many people think that that test device that we did is 100% on the spot, ready to go to market? Shouldn't see any hands. It isn't, okay? So we have to continue to optimize it. I know just yesterday, you know, the guys made a significant improvement in one of the parameters that we knew needed to be worked on. And that, you know, it's trial and error, folks. You know, whether you like it or not, you know, we have to keep tweaking these things or optimizing so that we can get all that. In the parallel, you may hear us talk about something called an inverted rib. What Young Woo's created is what's called a rib wave guide, which is, I'm not going to, you know, try to get too detailed, but an inverted one allows us, it just flips this thing upside down. It makes it easier to process and, you know, should speed up things for us. And Young Woo has already got a design for that, and we already have a mask ordered. I don't know if we've gotten it yet. We have gotten it already. So we're going to start making these things. Maybe you already have. Told you that we're going to be OC48 by the end of the year is what we're shooting for. And then what was the second parameter for telecom? OC192. Our goal is to try to get there by first quarter of next year. We can get this one, and that, you know, I mean, if we have to take a couple steps back, we will. We're going to do it right. But I'm excited to see the team perform for that one. Then Datacom, Michael gave a great description of why the slot waveguide is such a big deal for us. We still are seeking partnerships for the transceiver, the packaging, and all that, but we're going to be the engine, and we are designing this so that we can put that on a PIC platform. I'm using this thing that Michael had before. Where is something that's really important? If we have 4 25 gigabit modulators on this silicon chip, that's great, and we think that's, you know, the cost can come down because with polymers, we should be able to drive that. What if we had a single polymer modulator that could do 100 gigabits by itself? Think about that. If it's the same size, instead of 4 25s, now you've got 400s. Guess what we're answering? That 400 gigabits, you know, question that Michael said. That is hugely exciting that, you know, for us to get there. And how do we improve the performance? You need better materials that have higher electro-optic activity and all that. So this is a big deal. But we are absolutely convinced that the slot modulator with our polymers is the engine for the future. What kind of partner do we need? Okay, you saw that it was a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and here's that same blow-up that Michael showed you. But what we need is somebody that can do high-volume manufacturing. We have no desire to build brick and mortar to build these things ourselves. We're going to own the chip, all right? This all needs to be outsourced. So if we need a partner that can do high volume of printed circuit boards, do robotic manufacturing, and more importantly, we need to be able to get this polymer photonics engine into it. How many people are out there working with polymer photonics? Not a lot. And that's why there's been such a huge interest in us. from these other companies, because as Michael told you, nobody is able to figure this out, and people are getting the feeling, and they're being more and more confident because we keep showing this progressive success that we're the ones that could answer that question for them. So in summary, we are absolutely poised and ready, for what could, come up for this company. We know the market's ready for us, and that we have a scalable solution, and our timing couldn't be better. Okay, we haven't missed the train, and I get articles from all my friends, even ones overseas, that say, "Oh my gosh, this company's doing this." There's all kinds of research going on because everybody knows they have to solve it. Nobody's been able to solve it, and there are companies like Intel and others that have spent tens, hundreds of millions of dollars over years and years and years and haven't gotten there yet. Okay? So we're doing this pretty reasonably when you look at it. Then exactly what the customers are looking for, and we're ready to go. So with that, Michael and myself, or Jim, or anybody, we're available for questions. And by the way, on questions, I would like you to identify yourself, and please use the microphone because the people on the WebEx will not be able to hear you otherwise. So tell us who you are, and if you're a shareholder, and what's going on.
I'm John Rooney. I'm a shareholder, and I represent some other folks in New York that are, who've had a lot of confidence. It's been 4 years for some of us to be involved. Mm-hmm. And I hear you say we're ready, and I heard Dr. Webby explain some dynamics of the market, which you obviously use for your investor presentations to raise money. I've never seen any quantification of numbers to market size other than the $8 billion that was projected for 2019. At what point, what's the real timing of this? We're ready, everyone wants it. I've been in the chip business, and we sell our stuff 2 years ahead of having product.
Yeah. So what you see, what you saw there on the OC48 standard, let's say, okay, 2.5 gigabits. What they're going to want to see is a prototype alpha type device before I think that things are going to take off. We know that the market is ready for another solution. We're not ready to bring that to them yet. Now, have I talked to these customers? Yes. And it's not like the old days, and if you're in the chip business, you probably remember, where they would get 10 potential technologies, and they'd feed, I don't know, $5 million to each one and say, first one to the finish line wins. And they didn't care if they had a bunch of failures. The market isn't working like that now. What they're doing is they're saying, show me a moderate capability and your ability to improve and scale, and then we're talking. Okay. Well, we have to get to that 2.5 gigabit device. All right. That's what our objective is. If we, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be a setback, but we've got a plan in place, and Jim, working with Dr. Fred Leonberger and another consultant of ours that's a world-class guy that knows how to design these things and has done it for very large companies, that's working with us. That's what we're doing. Michael, do you have anything to add on that?
No, that's a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
I mean, the customers, they want to see tangible results. They want to see tangible technology. They don't want us to come in with PowerPoint slides. They want to actually see it and test it. So it puts the pressure on us to actually get the stuff working and then walk in their door and say, here, test it. And then the question comes is, okay, so if it works, that's fine. But the biggest question today is it scalable in cost structure? And can this scale? If we order 1 million of these tomorrow, can you scale it to the price we want to pay? So they're looking for those solutions.
Dick Haskell, I'm a shareholder. As you've laid out the various technical objectives and hurdles, is there some way, obviously we're all interested in the stock price, is there some one of these events that you might see as a tipping event relative to activity in the stock and the uptick in the stock price?
Yeah, we're, as you know, Dick, we're a interesting company, okay? And by interesting, I mean we have 65 million shares outstanding. We have roughly stuff that is not owned by insiders or people that can't freely trade the stock. We have, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 36 million shares that is available to be traded on a daily basis. Yet, so that should tell you, okay, we should be able to trade millions of shares a day, but our volume hangs out around, if we're lucky, 50,000 shares a day. So what happens? Somebody decides that they need to go buy a new pair of shoes, and they sell 500 shares of stock, and our volume for that day is 2,500 shares, and the stock drops 6 cents. Okay, so we get these wild swings. All right. So what I think is the real tipping point, and where we'll see the volumes go up, is I think having when we get a industry standard type device for telecom, let's say, and we can go to a customer, a potential customer, and announce something like that, the stock will go, I personally believe. I think that if we get any kind of direct investment from an investor like that, I think the stock will go. If we can do some kind of acquisition, and acquisition is not something I've never talked about. I've talked about it a lot, and we've always been looking. An acquisition that accelerates our timeline, I think that's something that will be a key, for what's going on. Because what would accelerate our timeline? Buying or acquiring capability that we don't have that gets us to this data center market sooner. Does that help you? Okay.
Kevin Fasek here. Do you think it's possible that sometime this year we might have a partnership for the slot waveguide modulator before we have the prototype beta for the RIB?
Those are things that are being worked in parallel, okay? But there's no way to know,
yeah.
Right? Because as for anybody that was here last year or listened to our presentation last year, I said there's 5 green candidates, right? Did anybody remember that? Okay, 5 green candidates. Well, those candidates have not gone red; they've just gone light green. Why? Because they want to see the results before they start really jumping in there. So if we get to this level at the end of the year, I feel good that we can re-engage those folks. Now, whenever I've done some updates for the board, I also update these potential partners. I tell them, sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't. But they know that we're out here. We keep banging on their door. But I'm not going to go back to them and say, okay, this is it, when we only meet 2 of the 5 parameters they're looking for. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sean Doherty, and thanks. That was a tremendous presentation, Doctor and Jim. The question I have, and it's pretty basic, you showed that the 2.5 device, the alpha device, but then you showed a bunch of stuff afterwards, and it looked like, the very last thing was the thing the market really wants. There's a lot of stuff in between. The 10, which you said, first quarter of 2017, potentially. But that's not what the market wants either. They want the stuff that was deeper down in that list. And the slides, Dr. Levery's slides, showed this kind of like out to 2020, 2022 guideline. Mm-hmm. But right now we're into the first quarter of 2017 with the 10,
yep.
Which isn't, I guess, which is really just kind of prototype type stuff. And you got all this stuff afterwards that really, the end goal is what the market wants. What's the time frame for that? So you have to be able to demonstrate your modulator working well. And so, we could say, well, we're going to design this thing and we're going to go straight to 25 or 100 gigs. But the right way to do it is a stepwise approach. Mm-hmm. And so if you start with OC48, 2.5 gig, and then you go to 10, it's just small optimizations. we know the material can go up to 100. But the question is we've got to demonstrate that. So the right way to demonstrate it is just demonstrate it at fairly low speed, understand what the issues are with the design of the modulator. We may have to tweak the material, we may have to tweak the testing, we may have to tweak the dimensions, and then going from 2.5 gig to 10 gig is not a big step. Going from 10 gig to 25 gig is not a big step. And so this is the way we're going to approach this. This is the if you like, the low-risk route to get to the very high performance. And so it may have taken us 3 years to get to 2.5 gig. It's not going to take us 3 years to go from 10 gig to 25 or 100, for sure.
And do you actually have any insight as to, because you did kind of post a hard deadline of first quarter 2017 for the 10, do you have any insight as to how you go from 10 to the deeper, more market desirable outcomes?
Yeah, no, I mean, with the slot modulator, I mean, clearly we'd like to see a 10 gigabit operation, but we're going to be designing 25 gig slot modulators. And, they may not work at 25 gig when you first try them, but they probably will go at 10, and then we're going to figure out what the optimization and how to improve it, because it's not going to take long, because if you've got the design to go to 25, because we showed a 4x25 solution, we're going to learn a lot this year from the waveguide one going from 2.5 to 10. And, we'll have the test setup working well, we'll have that tuned, we'll have the structure, we'll know the dimensions, we'll know the material. So then going to the slot to design a 25 next year is going to be quite easy.
When you say quite easy, you mean it's not going to be all that, it's not going to take a lot of time to do
We'll
that?
have the maturity of this year's experience
Sure.
of setting everything up. So we're not doing it from scratch. I mean, we're piggybacking on the work we've done this year. So it's when you start taking these devices to higher in performance, you've got to have the experience at the speed below, because then you're just optimizing it. You say, well, this specification is not quite there, so we'll change the dimensions or we'll change the material just a little bit, and then you figure out ways to get the performance up. But you don't want to do 25 gig from nothing. That's a disaster.
Sure.
So you've got to take a stepwise approach, and that lowers the risk.
Yeah.
Sean, Jim wants to kick in on this too. I think it may help too.
Yeah, I'm Jim Marcelli. Anyway, we have a partnership, if you will, or an agreement with under NDA with a group that has already designed a slot waveguide modulator that's used our material. We've actually announced that modulator ran at 32 or 36 gigahertz.
Yes, 32.
Okay. So, and we're continuing to work with that group. In fact, we renewed our agreement through the end of this year with their design. So while we're doing this other work with the RIB waveguide here in our operations here in Longmont and also in Delaware, the other group is using our materials and testing our materials in their slot waveguide. So we're learning from that as well. So, and they also have our you saw some of the chips. They have some of those chips of ours, and they're working on those. So independently, that's what's being done, separately from what we're doing here in Longmont.
And the other thing, Sean, that's important, remember there were two parts. That 2.5 gig, that's telecom, that is industry standard. The 10 gig, OC192 is industry standard. We can do that by ourselves, all right? The differentiation, what we're talking here, is that whole datacom thing. They want 400 gigs by 2020 or whatever the answer is, right? That is a very different problem, all right? That's the slot waveguide modulator on a silicon platform. Buy lasers, flip chip it, however you're going to do it, just get light through those lasers any way you can. And that one, all we have to really get to be right in the market is a 25 gigabit slot modulator, because you can put 4 of them. They're so tiny. They can fit inside the existing package. Where it gets really exciting is what I said, is if you have a single chip that can do 100 by itself, now, that's when you hold on, because it's going to, and that's what, does that help you? Okay, great.
We might have some from
Yep,
the...
Steve, let's see if anybody on the WebEx has sent anything in. This,
Kevin Fasik again. Not really sure how to phrase this question, but whatever happened to the optical loss measurements that we were expecting?
I'm not how to answer that question if you can't phrase it right.
Okay, then where are the optical loss measurements, and what's with the short device length?
So we have not published them, and we haven't put it out because we only have so much depth in the team. We felt it was much more important to meet the deadline of getting an operating modulator, and part of that whole optimization process is really about, if the loss is high, why is it? Is it the shape of the waveguide? Is it the material? And those are all the parameters that, we have to go through. Like I said, just yesterday we made a big change. So,
okay, works.
Yep. Steve, are there any on there?
See. Marty Milner asks, from a national security point of view, is it possible to see how important our materials might be? Has the government expressed any interest in accelerating our company's goal or participating otherwise?
Yeah. So there's a double-edged sword when you deal with the government, and what that means is if you go after some kind of government funding, then you have to deal with all the rules that go along with that. That brings a tremendous amount of overhead. So a short answer for Marty is yes, we've looked at different opportunities, but have chosen not to participate in them because of the extra burden that it brings on a very small team. So we'd much rather go after these commercial things first. I think once we get to some of these ultimate objectives, sure, it'd be well worth going and talking to those guys, but not now.
Okay, Harry Dunn asks a question that I believe he really means if the company had its druthers, how many people would they like to have in their lab working
150.
on this? 150,
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, in order for us to, I think, our lab is only so big. The guys in the chemistry lab are probably maxed out where they are, and we're doing everything we can there. I think of, objectively for this year, I'd like to see 2 more people in our optics facility to help out Steve and Young Woo. I think that is probably the optimum right now. And once we get beyond some of these goals that we set for this year, maybe there's more. But right now, I would say 2 more would probably do it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's not what I said. I said we have in the bank. We have $20 million from Lincoln Park Capital. Cheap money. Here.
Our deal with Lincoln Park Capital is the cheapest money we've found. It's cheaper than even the private offerings, considerably cheaper.
That would be one of the things that we could do. A partnership could end up getting NRE, but the reason we say that's cheap money is that's just on a weighted average of what the market price is over a certain period of days. Now, we haven't used the Lincoln Park line in a long time. Okay, now there's a huge motivation for us to achieve these objectives and get the price going up, because I'd much rather raise money through Lincoln Park at $1 than at 52 cents. So that's why we haven't used it. So we know we're good all the way through to January. There's a reason we're setting these deadlines on ourselves in order to get things going, because we can sell a certain number of shares to Lincoln Park every day, and they have to take them. All right.
Put out we have not done a put with Lincoln Park since August of 2014. All right. We control that. So depending on, obviously, as the stock price goes up and we need cash, we'll use the line as appropriate, so that we keep the dilution down to a minimum.
And for people that don't know what NRE is, that's non-recurring engineering. It's an investment that a partner would put into the company to help us get to the next level of performance. Okay, so if you're wondering what that was all about.
Okay, Dave Wolfen asks about how long our patent protection will protect us.
The patents are good for 20 years. We just got our first patent. The first patent issue was in 2000, I believe, 12. We have additional patents that are quite frankly that we just received just recently. So we got protection for several years, and we continue to look at our patent portfolio, and quite frankly, we'll probably have additional applications in the future based upon all the work that's being done in our Delaware lab. I would expect us I can tell you for a fact we'll continue to increase that patent portfolio, and based on both new designs as well as improvements to existing designs.
So Paul Berger asks, can you give us a little more color on what the actual competition for us looks like?
Yeah, I think Michael's probably better suited to talk about that. And the but I will say, competition for us does not necessarily mean somebody that's in polymers. All right, competition for us are all the competing technologies out there. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the data center market, the trend towards miniaturization is across industry. So our competition is also trying to figure out how to miniaturize and how to get PIC, photonic integrated circuit platforms. And so what you hear in terms of competition, there's PIC platforms in indium phosphide, and there's PIC platforms in silicon photonics. So there's probably a dozen companies with those types of directions. But none of these companies have a scalable technology like polymers. So when you start looking at the performance and the cost structures, we're actually better poised, better positioned to meet the cost structures with our PIC solution. But yes, there are other PIC solutions. They recognize the data center opportunity as a big one. We're not alone, but I think we're in a good technological position.
I think the last question here comes from Jay Meister, and I think he's talking about slide 15 where Dr. Levy talked about confidently about the ability to scale and perform at 100 plus. It's almost as though you have knowledge that the polymers you're working on absolutely work and will even work better in the future. Can you add anything to the commentary to give investors that same confidence?
Yes, yeah, I can. Polymers have been around 30 years. I actually worked with polymers 20, 25 years ago at Motorola and at Bell Labs. And we were hoping to implement polymer technology back then, but we couldn't. We knew it had the performance, but it didn't have the temperature stability. So if you fast forward today, there's been a lot more advancements in the chemistry of the polymers. This is what Lightwave brings to the party. They have the temperature stability that we didn't have 25 years ago. So the reason why I'm confident is I know they can go high speeds, but I'm equally more confident because they have the temperature stability to go into commercial products. And we really wanted that 25 years ago, and we never had it. And so that's why I'm standing up here being really excited.
All right. I'm going to end on that high note. But we can't thank you all enough for showing your great support for our company. I think that 2015 was a tremendous year for us because we stair-stepped our way to actually getting to an operating device that was completely done in-house. That's phenomenal, and I feel that we're positioned very well. And the next objective is to get to that first industry standard for telecom, and we're going to keep on trucking from there. So once again, thank you all. I appreciate our friends from Belgium always traveling this long distance. I could think of worse places to come than Colorado, but you guys have always been great, and all of you too. So thanks, and we'll see you all next year.